Are there unseen opportunities in a crisis? Learn why effectively dealing with change may open doors you never imagined. And on our green tips, pet products you can make at home. Next on Living Smart.
Agan is a union psychologist, a family therapist, and a university professor at the University of Houston. As a social psychologist and teacher, he explores the world of cultural and gender psychology. One of his most popular workshops at the Houston Jung Center is Never Waste a Good Crisis, Dealing with Change, and that is what we plan to explore today. Dr. Agan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Out of all the things that you teach, you chose the one on crisis. Why did you decide to teach people about change and getting used to change or ready for change?
Well, I'm sure if you'll look at your stock portfolio, we've had tremendous change in the last year. Yes. And although people are always going through changes, what I realize is huge collective change. Fears, insecurities, things nobody has any control over. And it seemed like a good topic. And that's
why is it, though, so hard for humans to change? Why is it so hard for us? We were supposed to adapt to things.
Well, it's interesting. I did look up the word crisis in the dictionary, and it refers me to gibberish. It says, see gibberish. So when I looked up gibberish, there was a man named Gibber who was in a jail in Turkey, and he wrote incessantly about all of his feelings. And so crisis has something to do with something not making sense, feeling confused. It's kind of like when an event happens in your life that makes no sense.
Right.
And it throws us off. From birth on, we're in crisis.
Right.
Most babies start crying when they're born. It's almost
a crisis.
Absolutely.
To get out of the womb,
Absolutely.
That warm womb.
They don't come around skipping and dancing. Life itself is a crisis of change.
And how are we supposed to guide this crisis or this change? Is there a way to guide it so that we don't suffer so much?
Well, those are great questions. The course was about the fact that sometimes we have crises that are over, above, and beyond what normally happens. I mean, we all go through crises, through the losses of loved ones, through changes in jobs that are normal. In fact, we look forward to a lot of crises or change that's normal, like moving from childhood to adolescence and start driving a car, which is a crisis, but it's also a wonderful change. And leaving for school, just going through many changes. The problem is that we don't expect the crisis. We don't anticipate that life is going to have a crisis because perhaps we're living in some sort of illusion that it's always going to go the way we think it's going to go, rather than seeing that the crises are all part of the journey.
Well, what needs to be taught then about change or crisis?
Yeah, to be taught about it.
Yeah, what do we need to know about it so that we can handle it better?
I think the main thing is to realize that it's all part of life and it happens. For example, there's only a 25% chance that people who are trying to have children are really going to get pregnant and have a child. But most people, when they're a young couple wanting to have children and they have a miscarriage or they can't seem to get pregnant, they freak out as if somehow they were just supposed to have a child, when in fact there's only a 1 in 4 chance of them being able to get a child. So they don't realize that their expectation doesn't necessarily always happen like it's supposed to.
Now, crisis is supposed to create a little bit of suffering, and yet you say we need suffering to change or to grow.
One of Carl Jung's great lines is that I like. He says, the present conflict, the present unendurable conflict is a sure sign you're on the right path. And I've always thought, well, what does that mean?
Right.
The apparently unendurable conflict is the sureness you're on the right path. What's happening is as we grow, we develop this adaptive personality in order to survive our parents and culture and religious world, and it's always at the cost of our authenticity. Like many of us were taught to be nice and be adaptable and be get along with everybody, conform at all costs. And so we do that. The first half of life might be fitting in,
right,
in order to get approval and love and acceptance. But then what happens is there's so much of our life that's been pushed down in the unconscious, in the shadow, the unlived life, because that wasn't acceptable. So it seems like the second half of life, and who knows when that starts, is about fitting out, bringing forth one's uniqueness.
Who you really are.
Who you really are.
Right.
Some people don't have permission to get angry about when they're offended or there's an injustice because they were taught that was wrong. Well, sooner or later in life, that needs to change. And Jung's idea was that often a crisis precipitates the needed change.
Now, can you grow with joy as opposed to suffering?
I knew you were going to ask that question. Because
why do we have to suffer all the time? Why can't we just grow with happiness and joy?
Well, I like to put it this way. The fact that life has suffering is just the way life is. We're all going to lose everyone we love, or they're going to lose us. Time doesn't march on. We march through time, and we all were born into a world we did not choose, and we will leave through death, and we don't have a choice about
We're all
dying.
leaving here, right?
Yeah, so suffering is part of life, like the yin and the yang, and the this and the that, and the good and the bad. The problem is it's when suffering's so overwhelming that we're not used to it or ready for it. And that's the kind of crisis that I put this class around, is to never waste a good crisis. Means when the crisis comes, let it do its work for you.
Right.
For example, right now the colleges and universities are just filled with students, not young ones, middle-aged people going back to school.
Right.
Because with the economic crisis, people said, you know, what I always wanted to do was to go study so-and-so.
Right.
And they're going, well, we don't have any money, and we don't know what the futures hold, so why don't I go back now?
Right.
So schools, universities are filled with people because of the crisis that got them moving forward, which they might not have done if
Which it's a good sign, because you're finding their authentic self.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
And we tend to get, you can create a crisis. For example, you could choose to go, you could go join a boot camp, exercise in the morning, which I did several years ago. 3 mornings a week from 5 to 6:30.
That is a crisis for sure, yeah.
We did that for 4 weeks, and it was a crisis in everything. My body, my mind, my spirit, my sleep habits. But out of the experience, I started eating better, sleeping better, got in better health. In other words, I chose to create a crisis by dealing with something. And that takes you got to be either risk-taking or crazy
or have courage.
Or have courage.
Right.
And of course, that's the secret, is to have the courage to face the changes that life brings.
Now, is there such a thing as good suffering versus neurotic suffering? The drama?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's a normal kind of suffering of like falling down and, trying to ride a bike, and, you're not going to learn to ride the bike until you fall a lot. And these are sort of the normal sufferings of life, of moving from childhood to adolescence to singlehood to getting out on your own and funding your own things. You could take through life as there's plenty of suffering along the way. Risking a love relationship and then it doesn't work out.
Right.
Because the grief is the cost of love. Because if you love and invest with somebody, at some point you're going to lose them, and so you're going to experience the grief. And all of those are opportunities to learn and grow and understand about yourself and life and stuff. The neurotic suffering is the suffering where we don't learn and grow from it, and we don't find new aspects of our personality, new skills. We don't become more whole, more aware, more conscious, and we just keep repeating it over and over again until we finally get it.
And we get angry, right? You get angry and you start scapegoating.
Yeah, years ago in my private practice, there was a guy who I really came to love a lot. He came in because he was starting his 4th marriage. He was like 52 or something. He was getting married for the 4th time.
He didn't learn after the first, second, or third time.
Great. He's a very talented, wonderful guy. And he said, the thing I realized in my 3 marriages is that my marriages were in trouble when my wife changed my name to plaintiff, or she changed her name to plaintiff. I thought that was cute. But he said, I saw that the thing that was in common in all 3 marriages was me. And that was really funny. But what he was saying was, what is it about these women I pick, and what is it about me that's afraid of intimacy or afraid of whatever? And as a result of that, we started talking and working through stuff, and he married just a most wonderful woman. And he learned to work through their issues and talk through things, and when they get in a crisis, they come in and see me. And so I've been teaching him how to communicate.
Took him a while, but he finally got it. Now, you say
got
that life, though, is full of many deaths. What did you mean by that?
Deaths? Mm-hmm. Well, deaths as in losses.
Right, I guess so. That's what you meant.
Well, we can't. The loss of the approval of our caregivers, the death of that, the death of our immature self that has its head in the sand, the death of dreams and hopes that may never come to pass. Mm-hmm. There's a difference between, most of us have expectations, either conscious or unconscious, and when they don't get met, we experience a little death. I encourage people to just have hope, which doesn't have an expectation. In other words, is to be open to life meeting us in a positive way or equipping us in a way, but not sort of have the hook of an expectation.
Now, let's say I'm watching this program and I just lost my job. Let's say and I'm a 50-year-old male or even a 50-year-old female, and I just lost my job. What's the first thing you tell these people? I'm sure they come into your office with these crises.
They do.
Or a divorce. My husband wants a divorce, or my wife wants a divorce, and totally unexpectedly.
Right.
What's the first thing you say to them?
Well, the first thing I say is, I'm so sorry. What a huge tragedy and loss. Because in all connecting with people in crisis, the most important thing is to connect to the emotional feeling, not to get out of the head and into the heart. For example, I'm so sorry. What a tragedy. Gee, it must be really scary for you. It must be difficult for you. Have you ever had anything like this happen before, had a loss or a deal? And I think the first thing is getting people to accept that it's happened. Mm-hmm. And that you're supposed to be depressed. You're supposed to be anxious.
Be in shock.
You're supposed to be.
The 5 stages of grief.
Absolutely.
Or the 6 stages of grief.
That anybody in a situation where you have the familiar and suddenly it's gone, be it a job or a relationship, anybody would have panic. Anybody would be apprehensive, insecure because of that. And what's interesting is when the crisis comes, a lot of people do self-loathing. Like, I should be strong. And it's like, no. I mean, this is the time to cry or to be sad or to nurture yourself because you've gone through a huge wound. And it's amazing how many of us are taught not to have these weak feelings, which are just as much a part of humanity as anything. And the crisis often brings those out. And I've heard many spouses say to the other spouse, well, it's been a huge loss, but we're sharing at a different level. We're talking about our vulnerabilities. We're talking about the sadnesses. We're communicating more at a heartfelt level rather than just being busy talking about the next activity.
Right.
We're talking about what does it mean, and I've heard many people say how much closer they've gotten to their family and loved ones because of the crisis. I heard a story last week, and I don't know if it was in the New York Times, somebody was telling me about it, but there was a taxi cab driver when he got off work, noticed so many people in New York on the streets, that when he got off work, he got his wife to make some food, put in a little basket or a styrofoam thing, and he'd get off his work taxi cab, and then he'd drive around and hand these out to people. Well, more people kept coming, and he and his wife got busy making, rice and whatever they're doing, and then other people in the apartment got busy with it, and all of a sudden, huge ministry and service that all of these people in the apartment who didn't know each other are now working together in the afternoon to get this food out for 250 people coming every afternoon to get food. And the article was saying how enriched the taxi cab driver feels and his wife because they're now joined together doing something for others.
Well, in a way, crisis does change people who are self-absorbed, doesn't it?
Yes, it can do that. Self-absorption or narcissism or being so focused. Yeah, it will either bring out the best or the worst in people, a crisis. Because often you'll find the most self-absorbed person can be so kind and so generous and so giving. And then you'll find some people in the crisis, because of their level of maturity or awareness, suddenly they become very closed and very threatened and very angry and sort of wall up. And I think it's important to give people permission to kind of be where they are during the crisis, because not everybody grieves the same way. Not everybody experiences losses the same way.
But I notice a lot of people do tend to scapegoat. I got fired because blah, 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 blah. Or they blame themselves or they start scapegoating. It's the economy, it's the government, it's the immigrants, it's, Do you see that a lot when you see people that come to you for help?
Well, sometimes that's not scapegoating. Sometimes that's
true.
It's absolutely. I mean, when a man needs money or a woman needs money, they just need money. They need a job. And yeah, there are a lot of people that to blame on a lot of our affairs in life. It's not like we bring it all upon ourselves.
But can you really get through change by focusing on that?
I think you have to. I think sometimes you have to sort of dump out all the people and things that make you angry as just a human way of venting and releasing our feelings about
insecurity
about being everybody else's fault.
Right.
And then you begin to own it. Because, I see a lot of people who won't own the fact that they've been sort of messed around by people because they don't want to appear as ungrateful or they don't want to appear as scapegoating, when in fact they have been messed around. And they need to talk about that, and someone a good therapist or friend or parent or something will give people a perspective. Well, of course you should be upset because you did get messed around by this deal. So it's not.
Let's move on.
Yeah, and let's move on.
It sounds like you have to own up to that, but at the same time, I'm thinking if you're focusing on that all the time, you're never going to get ahead.
And it's a process, and I'm not. I don't try to fix people.
Sure.
I try to work with them through the process and get them to honor that whatever they're feeling or going through it's just part of their reality, and it's not bad. The bad part is when we deny it or we repress it or we are unconscious about it, and that's the scapegoating you're talking about.
The characteristics of people who actually deal with change better than others. Is there such thing?
You mean like people who are asleep?
Resilient. Oh, really? Resilience or...
I think people who have suffered
a lot,
have had a history of suffering, that helps because they're not living with false expectations of everything being light and roses. I think it has to happen. When you sort of go through an experience that where you kind of go to hell and back, and you think you're going to lose everything and lose who you are, and all your props fall away, and you're in the abyss, where there's nothing but doubt, fear, uncertainty, and confusion, and you don't know how you're going to get through it. Maya Angelou has a great line. She said, "In the depths of one's crisis, there's nothing like a good night's sleep to restore one's life the next day." But when you go through that and you survive it by miracles or things happening that you didn't know were going to happen, or events or your own ingenuity, you have met the dragon and taken it on.
Right.
And that gives you a resilience for further down the line. It also gives you a sense of humor, because a lot of people are complaining about hangnails when there are people out there that don't have enough food.
Right.
And people are upset they're not going to be able to get a new this or a new that, and they have a roof over their head.
Right.
And they have central air and heat, and they have water, and people complain about such silly things. Half the world lives on less than $2 a day, they say.
Right.
Half the world's never used a telephone. And sometimes our suffering gets us in touch with those who are really suffering, and it changes our values. We find out what's important.
Did you just refer to the dark night of the soul?
No, but I can. I talked about the abyss.
The abyss,
Yeah,
which
the abyss.
that's kind of led me to the dark night of the soul. Tell me about that.
Yeah, St. John of the Cross wrote a poem about it in the 14th century. The dark night of the soul, there's several metaphors to look at it. One is being alone on the sea with in your wee little boat, and Hurricane Ike shows up, and you just feel totally overwhelmed.
Right.
You don't know how you got in it. You don't know how to get out of it. You don't even know if you will get out of it. And these experiences, and this maybe sounds strange, if you go through that, you're a very, very fortunate person, because it will deepen your sense of life. It will deepen your maturity level. Most people are an inch deep and a mile wide. I call it the mall generation, M-A-L-L, but it may be M-A-U-L. And we're so busy. But a real suffering, you going through cancer or a loved one or a death or a loss of a business or something, these things, your life becomes more of an inch wide and a mile deep through these experiences, because it causes you to develop some spirituality, like waiting, trusting the mystery you can't see, connecting with the earth and the birds and the life around you, and becoming aware of just being alive until all the props are gone. you don't realize that the gift of life is life itself. It's just being alive. And those dark nights, which I've had a couple of them that are so utterly terrorizing, but you learn to surrender because we're here because of some mysterious choice, and none of us made this thing called life, and we're all dependent on something else that's working within us. And this is where our faith comes in.
Right.
Not faith in all these good answers or promises, as it were, but faith that there's something higher power that is working with us in consort with life. And I in my 30 years in private practice, I've often said to people of many different traditions and races, ethnicities, religions, I say, I think what you're going through is bigger than the both of us. I think you're going through a major transition, and I don't know what it is, but I will walk with you through it because this is too big just to fix so quickly. And I've never had anyone say, "Don't give me that stuff." Everybody goes, "Really?" I said, "Yeah, you know what I'm talking about?" And they go, "Yeah." And this has been a long time cutting it. Yeah, it really has. Because see, there's
an opportunity.
It is. It's like the sap in the tree of our uniqueness is always rising, whether you believe it or not. Something bigger than us is going on within us.
You mentioned Ike, and we talked a little bit about what Ike did to us as a community, how it changed us.
Didn't it?
Yeah.
Didn't it?
People began to help each other, to talk to each other. People who had never spoken to each other, neighbors, began helping neighbors.
I mean, in my community...
marriages got fixed.
I'm telling you,
electricity.
when you turn out the lights, and of course I understand babies were conceived during this period too, but when there's no electricity for anybody and all the freezer food's going down, I mean, we had barbecues in the back and we had parties. And then the thing that just touched me so movingly as the week went on, one side of the street would get electricity, and you drive down a street and you go over extension cords that'd be going over to the neighbor across the street, and you go bump, 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 and you saw people caring and giving. It's something like the soul flourishes in a crisis. People begin to support and care for each other, and of course I love that because I think we would benefit by doing that when there wasn't a crisis.
The way that was an example of good suffering.
Yeah.
Tell me about transcendent suffering. What does that mean?
I think transcendent suffering, and this is kind of a Jungian model, the transcendent suffering would take us into a deeper meaning in life. That, kids don't care if you have new furniture growing up. They don't even know what kind of carpet you have. But they do care if mom and dad are there to wrestle and play and are available to read stories and to hang together. And the suffering that transcends past the moment into something meaningful is something worth going through.
How do you know you're living smart?
I live smart by being conscious and aware, and I have a good sense of humor and try to live in gratitude.
And thank you so much for joining us. And now on our Green Tips, safe pet products you can make at home with pet lover Courtney Roberts.
Green dog grooming products are products that are low in chemicals and carcinogens, such as sodium lauryl sulfate and sodium lauryl sulfate that tend to cause cancer. They use a lot more ingredients from the earth, such as aloe vera, rosemary. You can use different flowers for fragrances, but they're more natural than your regular dog grooming products. I have a simple recipe for a dog grooming spray that you can use as a flea and tick repellent and also as a freshener in between baths. It consists of 4 cups of water, a half a cup of oatmeal, a fillet of aloe vera, a sprig of rosemary, and 4 chrysanthemum buds. And you'll throw all of them in a blender and blend them up. Put cheesecloth over a bowl, pour it into the bowl. The cheesecloth will drain the chunks out, and then you just pour it into a spray bottle. There is a lower chance of your dog getting cancer from certain chemicals that are used, or also the colors and dyes that are in regular dog products You also have a lower incidence of allergens, which could be caused by the same things, the toxins that cause the cancers and other diseases. The benefits of all-natural dog grooming products is that they are safe to use around anyone, and there are much fewer chemicals than in the regular dog grooming products, and they're safe for the environment.
To learn more about green tips and dealing with unexpected change, go to our website. There you'll also find a complete resource list. You can also email us or call us with your comments at 713-743-8513. And that's our show for today. I hope you've enjoyed it. Remember to live smart. I'm Patricia Gras. Have a peaceful week.
For a transcript of this program, send $6.95 to the address on your screen. Please include the name of the guest.